people say, well, there isn't anything I can do as one person. It's like Joe Rogan's one person. And his success is really remarkable. First of all, you can't just push it aside as chance, because Rogan was a good fighter, and that's hard. And then he was a good comedian, and that's really hard. Maybe no harder than being a fighter, but hard. And then he had a pretty good TV career, and that's hard too.
People forget he was on news radio, which was
I mean, Rogan's established. Yes, exactly. He established his credibility in 3 different domains, and then it's also extremely difficult to be a good interviewer. You actually have to listen.
Yeah.
And he listens, and so Rogan's a very good example of someone who, as an individual, stayed closely allied with the truth and has had, well, we have no idea what his impact is going to be, because Rogan has 11 million listeners per episode now. I see absolutely no reason why he won't have 20 million listeners per episode in a year, especially if people keep trying to take him out. And it's so funny, especially watching CNN go after him. You know, they're all treating, the mainstream media, they keep treating Joe like he's the fringe. I think, are you people, well, I know, these legacy news media sources are dying. All their really competent people have already gone off to do other things because they could. And they're living in like 1975, which is a very weird place to live at the moment. And they look at Rogan and they think, what did the CNN guy who was criticizing the other day said, we have all these departments devoted to news analysis.
Brian
and Rogan
Stelter, I believe.
Rogan is just winging it. It's like, you try winging it, buddy, in front of 11 million people and see how successful you would think that's easy, dancing on a tightrope where any word you say that's false is going to result in, well, complete and utter pillorying of you from multiple news media sources all over the world every day, which is what's happened to Joe nonstop in the last month, despite the fact that he hasn't said anything stupid. So wing it. You think that's so easy. It's not so easy. And look what he's done. It's like, it's amazing. And all he's done,
What do you think is going to happen with him with Spotify?
Oh, Spotify won't remove Rogan?
You don't think so?
What are
They'd
the
be
odds?
out of their mind.
What are the odds?
They dropped from $60 billion valuation to 36. That's $24 billion. You think the board is sitting there, they're diehard Joe Rogan fans, or do you think they're profit margin, top line revenue fans?
Oh, I would rather that they were the latter, the profit margin types, because that's what a corporation should do. And I'd trust them more if they were doing that.
I'm with you.
But I also think that if they have any sense, and I know how this is going to turn out, it's turned out in my life like 50 times this way.
Yeah.
The heat goes on, the pressure's on, you're in the desert, it's unpleasant. You wait it out. You wait it out. You wait it out. If you haven't done anything wrong, you wait it out. You don't apologize. You don't back down. You wait, and things viciously turn in your favor. Now, waiting it out while you're roasting, that's not pleasant. And if the Spotify types have any sense, they think, yeah, well, that's a drop, but you know, it's part of the death throes of the legacy media. And once all the dust settles, CNN will have half the viewers they have now, and Joe Rogan will have twice the viewers, and we'll be doing just fine. And Rogan, as long as he keeps doing what he's doing, he came out on Instagram. This is so funny. He came out on Instagram to talk about all this a few days ago, and I thought, you nailed it, Joe. He came out and he said, it's a paraphrase, and I'm going to do it a bit comedically. He basically said, well, everyone knows I'm kind of a lunkhead and I have lots to learn, and I probably haven't managed this like perfectly because I do my own scheduling and I just talk to people I'm interested in. And so possibly I could have presented a more balanced view some of the time, and I'll try to do better in the future. And so all the legacy media said, Joe Rogan apologizes, which is not really the case. Mm-hmm. And then he talked about how much he liked Neil Young, and none of this was for show, and none of this was
he's as sincere as it gets.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
he told the story when he was at a Neil Young concert. I mean,
security
he's genuinely a fan of security.
It was great, man. And so as long as Rogan keeps doing that, and he's been doing it for 5 years, and it's not like he hasn't faced pressure before, it's clear to me that I just can't see any scenario short of his assassination that ends up in Rogan not having 20 million viewers an episode in a year. And so as long as he's careful, like he is, I don't think Rogan can be canceled. So even if Spotify dumps him, it's like, who's dumping who here? Rogan, he's on Spotify. It's not necessarily. Spotify might be on Rogan. It's not so clear. And so what's going to happen? They kick him off? Well, he'll just have another platform like tomorrow.
Immediately.
Yeah, and he'll have all the money Spotify
Sure.
gave him, which was actually quite a lot
have
of money.
more. He'll have way more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
He'll have way more.
Did you see what Pat had to say about this topic yesterday? I don't know.
I think Rogan is a billion-dollar guy. I think Elon needs to sign a 20-year, $50 million a year contract with Rogan and start a company, like a social media company. Choose which route you want to go, direct competitor to YouTube, to Google, to... It's not like Elon hasn't done it. He didn't create a company that was revolutionary. He went against cars. Cars have been around for a while.
Well,
he didn't
and
invent
rockets.
cars. Yeah, but what I'm saying is cars and rockets have been around. So it's not like he went and invented the rocket or invented a car. You don't need to invent something. Just go direct against YouTube. Go direct against Spotify. And Elon and Rogan could pull it off with the help of Peter Thiel. It'll work itself out, and they'll recruit the right people. They'll make a few phone calls, and the world's going to come saying, hey, if you like to have a platform for free thinkers and where you're not going to be censored, give us a call or, do this. And it would take off.
And they say things like, well, Joe Rogan, people shouldn't listen to him because he just wings it. It's like, how clueless can you possibly be? Or you have people like at CNN who treat Rogan like he's an outsider, despite the fact that he's pulling in numbers that are at least five to 8 times their average viewership. Joe is fringe. It's like, really? We'll see who's fringe here. And part of this is purely technological. It's like, there's no way these legacy apparatuses can compete. How can they? Printing with universal distribution is free. Video with universal distribution is free. How can a network possibly compete? It can't. So spiral death. And as they die, they lose their editors, they lose their fact checkers, they lose their good journalists, they lose everybody with courage, and then they put out pablum and they're tempted by clickbait because that's what you have to do while you're dying. It's like, Christ, we have to attract attention somehow. So you say, well, Joe Rogan apologized, and everybody clicks on it and they read it and they think that's a lie, and so you've lost another 5% of your viewership.
CNN is probably sitting in their board meetings saying, God, please, we need Trump to be president again, because when he was president, we were making money. We need somebody like that to be president. They're begging this guy to come back. Can you imagine if CNN ends up like putting him on left and right to berate him, but at the same time, they're getting more eyeballs?
You see politicians, we have to protect our image. It's like, really? Do you? You have to protect your image, do you? What's your image exactly? Well, it's what we want people to think we are. Well, how about you be that instead of being the image of that? And you see this dialogue taking place. People don't even notice it. It's like, we have to protect our image.
Yeah.
It's like, Rogan doesn't protect his image. He doesn't have an image. He's actually there, which is why people are listening to him, or come up with some other excuse. He's a gateway to the alt-right. It's like, really, this left-leaning person with high degree of sympathy for socialist views on the working class site, who's a psychedelic experimenter, hippie, countercultural person, is a gateway to the alt-right. Really, that's
Rogan
your story.
you're talking about.
Yeah, of all the stupid stories,
Right.
It's so ridiculous. The only way you could possibly believe that is if you knew nothing about him, because that's just not who he is at all. It's preposterous. But the only other explanation is that people are listening to him because they trust him, because he's trustworthy. Well, God, could that possibly be? And all the media forces that are arrayed against him aren't trustworthy. It's like, well, a lot of that, as we already talked about, that's a consequence of rapid technological transformation.
How much of that is based on the conversations he has regarding the vax? Because prior to COVID or even vaccine mandates, nobody thought that he was center right. Nobody.
Oh yeah,
he was
no, he was getting that because he was
before COVID.
Yeah, he was hypothetically, a founding father of the intellectual dark web, and that was going back 5 years ago. And everybody viewed everybody who had a mainstream view, let's say, viewed all the people who were in the intellectual dark web, for lack of a better term, as gateway to the alt-right. Brett Weinstein and his wife Heather, those terrible right-wingers. It's so preposterous. Right. And Sam Harris as well, another hyper-conservative person.
So not that.
It's just not that at all. Not at all.
Are these people actually tuning in and listening,
No,
or are they just making
never.
assumptions?
Oh no, they don't listen. No, people who criticize. Well, what happens often, and this is why Rogan keeps growing in popularity, it happened with me to some degree, is that people come because they're curious, and then they do listen, and then they think, oh, this is nothing like what I've been told. It's in fact and I think this was particularly true in my case in relationship to accusations of, say, far-right sympathies. It's like, well, what about all the lectures I gave on Nazism for like 30 years at two of the biggest educational institutions in the world? What about those?